Mangaholics, so welcome back to another video. Today I am bringing you my December wrap-up. In the month of December, I did a load of vlog projects, got through a load of books, and have ended up with a total of 13/15 books, depending on how you look at it, read in the month, 5 of which were rereads and or 7, again, depending on how you look at it. I had a really interesting reading month. I had a lot of variety while still keeping true to the seasonal vibes. I had, like I said, a load of vlog projects on, which was a lot of fun. I do have a lot of books to talk about though, so let's get straight into them. And the first vlog project that I undertook was the second installment in my friends take over my TBR vlogs that I have been doing, and this one was from my friend Terry, who selected 3 books for me to read, and then I could see how much our tastes align. The first book in that vlog that I read was The Rhino Keeper by Gillian Forsberg, and this one ended up getting a really solid 4 stars from me. I really did like the vibes of this one. This is the story of a man and his rhino, the first rhino that was kept in captivity in Europe, in Holland I think it was. It was a very, very interesting story, and it is based on real facts. It is based on history, and while I generally don't like reading about animals in captivity, I'm not a fan of animals being in captivity, I did like the way that it discussed the time period, people's approach to animals, the exoticizing of these animals was handled in a very fascinating way. So while not necessarily a subject matter that I would have chosen on my own, it was a lovely story and I'm glad that I read it. Another one that I read was Fall of Bones by Tim Hardy. This is the first book in the Brotherhood of the Eagle series by this author, and it's a epic fantasy. It's a self-pub fantasy, and this is one that I am definitely going to be continuing on with the series. I really did sink into it really quickly. It's not necessarily new favorite material from this first book, but it was definitely one that has really captured my excitement and my interest. I'm really glad that I finally got around to reading it because it comes from my favorite year of SBFBO, which is SBFBO 7. I'm trying to work my way through all of those finalists. I got one in my Esme vlog and now I've got one in my Terry vlog, so it's working out well. All my friends are pushing me towards my goals. Yeah, I had a great time with this, and like I said, I can't wait to continue on. The last book for the Terry vlog was Bloodsong by Anthony Ryan. This is the first book in the Raven's Shadow series. It's a sort of assassin style fantasy in which we are following Valen, who is a sworn brother of this brotherhood that try and take care of the populace. It's kind of like a cult or an order, but they are somewhat assassins. They're sort of the law and order of this world, and we're following him as he readies for this looming conflict that is about to happen in this kingdom. And I really did enjoy this first book. This is probably, not including rereads, my book of the month. I had an amazing time with this first book. It's so well written, it's so compulsively readable because they're not short books, but I got through it so quickly and I was super excited to keep picking it up. Like, it was one of those that I didn't want to put down. He's not the easiest character to root for, I think, from the beginning. And this is that he's not like one of those that's really whiny or anything. It's just that he has a very distant personality to me at the very beginning of the book, and then suddenly I kind of just clicked with him, and then it all began to fall into place and I had an amazing time. 5 stars. Awesome book. Because I am super extra, I did also read its sequels, which are book 2 is Tower Lord and book 3 is Queen of Fire, which I kept in my head thinking of Heir of Fire by Sarah J Maas, which is a very different book. So book 2 I ended up liking a lot. I liked it a bit less. I think the plotting in this one and the pacing in this one just didn't grab me the same way that book 1 did. So as much as I still had a really good time with it and I really did enjoy it, it didn't quite live up to the height of book 1. And I did suspect that it was more middle book syndrome than anything else, that maybe it was just trying to tie things up ready for the next book. However, sadly, book 3 was quite a big letdown. I found that I wanted more from how the characters got there on an emotional basis. I felt really connected with Valen in book 1. By the time we get to this point, I just didn't feel the same level of emotional connection with anyone or anything. And I feel like I lost something along the way, that maybe book 2 wasn't actually middle book syndrome and more was just literally a step down towards book 3, which was another step down, which was a shame, but still a great series overall, and so many innovative things and such a great writing style. So I definitely will pick up more by this author. I have my eye on, is it The Traitor? I can't remember what that series is called, but I'll put a picture up. I'm definitely excited to try more from this author because book 1 was such an incredibly solid read, and I think in a way that's more to the detriment of books 2 and 3, but because they didn't live up to the heights of their predecessor, they had that to be compared to. So it's almost like an unfair comparison, even though they're sequels. The next vlog project that I did was I read Baba Yaga books. I love Baba Yaga. She's one of my favorite mythological figures, and I really wanted to read more from her. So I picked up 3 new books, and then I also, just because I was feeling the vibes, ended up rereading 3 others. So one of the ones that I did pick up that was not a reread is Deathless by Catherine M. Valente. This one definitely falls more into the speculative literary end. I think this is definitely one of those that people who don't normally read fantasy could definitely get into. It's a war narrative, but it also features Koschei the Deathless and Baba Yaga, who are some of the most interesting and most well-known mythological figures in Slavic folklore. So I was very excited to see how Catherine M. Valente would depict them, and I definitely think that she took a very interesting turn with them, lacing them into history and marking them as these ever-present beings, but that they are not just this one ideal, not just this one myth. There's more layers to that, and I think that she did a wonderful job of tackling that. Throughout the story, we are seeing the 20th century essentially in Russia, and we are following Maya and we are following Koschei. She is in love with him and she will follow him to the ends of the earth, and she follows him through war, she follows him through pain, through suffering, through love, and then she returns to her hometown and sees there is nothing left of it, of the people of the town, and what that stirs within her. It's a lot of symbology. It's a lot to do with how much you can lose yourself in an unequal relationship, as much as how much she can literally lose in this mythological sense. And the metaphors and the beauty of this was absolutely incredible. Definitely need to read more by this author, and I would highly recommend you check it out if you want a Baba Yaga retelling that is a bit more unique. Another one that I picked up is not technically a Baba Yaga retelling, but it is The House with Chicken Legs, which is Baba Yaga's, and that is Thistlefoot by Jenna Rose Nethercott. And this one, we have 2 brothers who are estranged from one another. We have one who is the very upright moral son, and then we have the one that is a con man and he has problems with alcohol and he's not the best behaved. And they're estranged and they're separated by miles upon miles of American highway, because this is during, I think it's the end of the 19th century. However, they then receive a very unusual inheritance, and that is this house with chicken legs. And it's how these 2 brothers then come to bond both with the house, because it's a sentient house, and with each other, and how they mend their relationship. And it is a story of brotherhood. And I read so many stories of sisterhood, and it was so lovely to read one of brotherhood that wasn't tackling trauma and things, but it wasn't one of them is so irreparably messed up and the other one has to step in and help out. It wasn't, you know, one has to help out with one's family. None of the typical narratives that you have. It was these 2 brothers having to bond over this house and with this house and mend their past, and it was a lovely depiction, I think, of a sibling relationship, and I really appreciated the way that it was tackled, because it took down some of those alpha macho tropes that you normally get in stories of brotherhood, and I thought that was lovely. Another one that I read for the first time was The Witch and the Tsar by Olesya Salnikova-Gilmore, and this one is, again, a little tiny bit more literary. It is not quite Winter Night level, but it does have that standalone literary fantasy air to it, and in it we are following a young woman who lives in the forest. She is a witch, and the villagers therefore despise her, but they also need her help. Her herbal remedies and her medicinal remedies do tend to actually be able to help people, so they distrust her, but they also want her help. So she's in this position where she can't really completely isolate herself, because people will show up at her door, but at the same time people don't treat her very well. She was best friends with this girl when they were younger. However, she has since been married off to the Tsar, no less. loneliness. When she discovers that her friend is sick, she decides to go travel in her house to go and tend to her friend to try and heal her. It turns out that the fate of all of Russia is dependent on her friend. It is a story of friendship. It is a story of womanhood. It is a story of the bond between women, how important retaining that can be, and of advocating for yourself. It's got a lot of things that you tend to see in standalone fantasies. And I think it was done well. I genuinely enjoyed it. I think it was a gorgeous story. It was really well written. It was beautiful. So while I don't think that it's necessarily the most unique story, I just loved the way it was told and presented. I thought the atmosphere was great. And I guess I was in the mood for it anyway, but I had a wonderful time. Coming in with the rereads, the first book that I decided to reread was one that I've already read this year, and that is One for My Enemy by Olivia Blake. The first time I read this, I gave it 4 stars. I did really enjoy it, but there definitely is a thing with the audiobook that highlights something that is rather annoying about the writing style, and that is that the characters feel really compelled to say each other's names. It's a romance, it's a Romeo and Juliet retelling, so these characters that are in love with each other say each other's names a lot. You will never forget what these characters are called. There is no way at any point 2 years down the line you're gonna be like, oh, what was the character called? No, never gonna happen, because it says it several hundred times, I swear it. And that was really annoying to me. But because I knew that, going in the second time, I was like, do you know what? I don't care. And the fact that I really, really wanted to reread it, even though it's not even been a year, says so much about how much I actually enjoyed the story. So this time, deciding to overlook the fact that, okay, maybe they're saying Marsha and Dima too many times, if I just go by how much I've enjoyed the story and how well it's told, this is a 5-star read. And I do not regret changing my rating, because it was a great time. Another one that I decided to reread is Vasilisa by Julie Matheson. This is the first book in a series of somewhat like generational companion novels, and this is the one that is centered around Baba Yaga. Well, not only centered around Baba Yaga, but in this story we are following Vasilisa, who lives in 1919 in America, and she has a Russian family, and her family are not doing very well financially. Her father has gone to war and seemingly hasn't returned. Her grandmother is ill, and then she gets sucked into this old Rus myth, essentially. And now her and her friend Ivan are sucked into old Rus and encounter all of these Slavic folkloric characters. I really liked the way that Julie Matheson played with these characters and changed them up a little bit. She kind of combined them with other things that are known across other mythologies. So like Baba Yaga isn't one person, it's 3 sisters. You do have obviously the Baba Yaga element to it, especially the house with chicken legs, but you also have things like, you have a maiden mother crone vibe to it, you have a fates of Greek mythology vibe, all in one. And I think that she did that combining really, really well, and I love these books. I do want to give the second book, Elena the Brave, at some point a read as well, because what I love about this series is the first book, which is this one, has a very folkloric fairy tale vibe, while the second book has more epic legend vibe. So if you were going to do a comparison, this one feels more like a grim fairy tale, while the other one feels more like Arthurian myth. And I cannot wait to see how Julie tackles the third one whenever it does come out. And the other reread that I had for this vlog project was The House with Chicken Legs by Sophie Anderson. This is one of my favorite middle grades of all time. My mum loves this. I love reading it to my kids. I've read it to them twice. I have read this book 4 times now. I read it by myself, I've read it to my kids twice, and then I reread it. So I love this book so much. In this story we are following Marinka, who is the granddaughter of a Baba Yaga. In this story there are multiple Yagas, and Yagas are essentially reapers. They come to help guide the dead from the realm of the living to the realm of the dead. Marinka is really tired of this life. She's really tired of not being able to stay put in one spot for too long. She's really tired of being trained to be a Yaga when she doesn't want to be. And there are so many things about this story that are just so beautiful. And one of the things that I love is that Marinka isn't necessarily the most likable protagonist to begin with. You really see her grow, which is great for children to read, because she's not just this picture perfect amazing child from the get-go. She has flaws and she needs to learn. The curve on which she goes and the trajectory of the story and where it takes her is just absolutely stunning. And the last vlog project that I had so far for this month is that I did end up reading an assortment of Yule Christmassy vibed books. So the first one that I read was The Wood at Midwinter by Susanna Clarke. This is a short wintry novella. Now this audiobook is, I think, less than an hour long. So there is very little I can tell you about it in terms of plot. With novellas, I feel like characters don't necessarily get developed to the extent that I enjoy personally. There have been exceptions. I'll do a video on favorite novellas at some point if you want, but for the most part, it's not something that I feel is the point of a novella. I feel like a novella is normally just almost like a evolved fairy tale, and that's kind of how this felt. So it ticked all of the boxes, but isn't one that I am going to be like, oh my god, I love that. I might reread it over Christmas next year because it is one that fits the vibes and did what I wanted it to do, but it's not one that I think I'm going to feel strongly about. The vibes were great. The writing style is always wonderful with Susanna Clarke. For the most part, I think that she does a really good job of executing that immersive surroundings. She did the same in Piranesi. She did the same in Jonathan Strange. She really sinks you in and then lets you loose into this surrounding that she has made for you. It's like a little playpen that she's made for your brain. And I like that. So I did like the book, but it's not one that on a plot or character level I'm going to think about very much. The next one that I have is Upon a Frosted Star by Emma Kuznia. I love these. I love these ballet retellings that Emma Kuznia has been writing. I read Midnight Neverwood last year, which was a retelling of The Nutcracker, and then this one is a retelling of Swan Lake. I hope that she keeps working her way through the Tchaikovskys because it just makes me want to watch Tchaikovsky. I loved this. I really did. I think that it had such a lovely vibe, a lovely atmosphere. They're not as literary as they look. If you look at the covers and you hear the synopsis, then you hear that it's based on the ballet, you're expecting a level of prettiness to the writing style that I don't think it quite reaches. But at the same time, I feel like that's a good thing because it makes what is normally deemed as something quite elitist, like the ballet, feel really approachable. So if you're someone who maybe is interested in the idea of ballet, but you think maybe I won't understand what's going on because there's no words or whatever, this could be a good way to kind of accustom yourself to the narrative. But obviously it is changed because it is a retelling and we do have an interesting character to drive it. I think I liked this one a little bit more than Midnight in Everwood, but that makes sense because I do actually like Swan Lake more than I like The Nutcracker. So I feel like that's just kind of me being like, oh, I like this plot more and therefore I like this book more. But I think they're both a really good retelling, and if you are interested in the ballet at all, I would highly recommend you checking them out. Another one that I absolutely loved was A Midwinter's Tale by Lily Hayward. This is one that I thought, I like it, but I didn't think I would love it as much as I did. This is folklore. Like if you took maybe the Elements of Cadence series vibe from Rebecca Ross and put it in a Hallmark movie, then you've got this book. You have a woman that she's very career driven and she's in London, and then she gets a phone call from her uncle to say that he has had a stroke and he needs help. But she has this big meeting coming up that is going to be like career defining. So she thinks, okay, in preparation for that, because I've got a few weeks, I will go take care of my uncle and then I'll make it back in time for this meeting. So she does. So she goes and she helps him sort out his house and take care of him while she's there. And then while she's there, she realizes that some people are trying to badger him into selling his land because they want it for themselves on this island. So then it's how she starts like standing up for him, how she reconnects with this kid that she knew when she was younger, and how she gets back in touch with who she used to be as a child and who she wants to be as an adult. I really loved the vibes. I loved the way that this story presented the atmosphere, the way that magic felt like it was touching everything. This book gave me what Elements of Cadence should have, in my opinion. They're not the same, obviously, but there was just an element to it that was like, this is what I wanted from that. I had a wonderful time with it. And the last books that I did manage to read are also rereads, and that is The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, this is why it's like I've read either 13 books or 15 books, depending on how you count it. Because The Lord of the Rings, people do consider a trilogy. I think that's mostly because of the movies, though. So it kind of depends on how you look at it. I, in my head, consider it a trilogy just because it is easier to break down the reading process for me and then evaluate how I feel once I get to certain points. But obviously I do know that Tolkien's intention was for this to be one book. Consider it how you will. I'm not one of those who's going to judge you no matter which way you lean. I really love these books. I love the way that Tolkien tells stories. I love also how different in vibes these feel. I don't think I have read them back to back before. I have read them somewhat separately, and I love the different tone that they have. When you read them back to back, the tone shift is really interesting because you have this one that feels somewhat like a middle grade adventure story, and then you have the Fellowship that starts out quite gently, obviously because you have quite a decent chunk that is just set in the Shire, and so it starts in gently, and then boom, suddenly you have the Wraiths. Things start amping up, and then things chill again once you're in Rivendell, and then they amp up again. And I love the way that you can understand what is worth protecting of this world because he's showing you it. He is showing you the Shire, he's showing you Rivendell, he's showing you all of these beautiful places that you want to protect, that you understand why people should fight against Sauron. And I love that because that should be how we should feel about our world. I want our world to sound this beautiful and this amazing. And look at how beautiful our world is. Don't we want to preserve this? That is what these do, and I love that. So really glad to have read these. I do have a vlog coming, but it will be a while, but I had a gorgeous time with these books. And there you have it. That is everything that I managed to read in December. I am so sorry this is longer than usual for a wrap up, but I did read so many books because I had so much time to just sink into my reading and just read books all day, and I had a wonderful time with that. So let me know in the comments down below how your December went and what your highlight of the end of the year was, and I hope that so far 2025 is treating you well. But that is all for me for today, so thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you in another one soon. Bye!